All righty, we are live. Welcome to the Kneaux post-game show. Saints just dropped game three to the Packers, 18-17 in Lambeau Field. You know, Packers have a very, very storied history behind winning in Lambeau for home openers and, in Lambeau in general. But nonetheless, we're going to kind of start with some initial reactions. I have Jason Watson here with me. Um, Initial reaction is Carr's hurt for me. So I don't know if you're feeling any different or any better about that, or how you feeling initial reaction, Jason?
Uh, I mean, the car injury hurts, obviously, and then Ruiz going out early with concussion protocol is a big blow. But I don't know, man. At this point, that's secondary on my mind with a game that we should have won.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
I mean, obviously, early on, reading, I believe Nick Underhill, he had spoke on what he was hearing. Carr could miss some time. Obviously, going forward, that's going to be something that they'll have to work with Winston and Taysom to figure out game plan with for the next few games. Unsure right now, current timeline, how long he's going to be out. Uh, we do have Kamara coming back in the next week. His suspension's done. We got to 2-1. We got a winning record in the 3 games we were without him. It just stings because it could have been 3-0, should have been 3-0.
Right. Even like you said, despite the car injury, that's one that you can't drop an unanswered 18 points in the fourth quarter and expect to win the game. I know in the pregame show, Marcelo said that to beat the Packers is all you have to do is score 21 points. And he was right. One more touchdown, or instead of the field goal, the touchdown in the red zone. Um, it's a different ball game completely. We're up, and they maybe don't even go for two there. Who knows? But it definitely, like you said, is one that you should have had for sure. There's absolutely no reason that you dropped that game. I mean, we can point fingers on defense and everything like that, and offense for not putting up points in the fourth quarter, but just kind of complete on both sides. Someone had to do something, and it felt like it was just one thing after another taking our licks, and we didn't quite get those licks back. The good news is, like you said, AK is coming back. Kamara's we're getting a very otherworldly talent in the backfield back. And I mean, despite the offense not doing anything, with the ball in the second half, lots of punts. If we're looking for a bright spot, it's the fact that based on what we're hearing, it seems like we're going to see Winston for at least one more week. Um, and despite everything, Winston came in and went 10 for 16 for 101 yards. No touchdowns, obviously, because we could have had one of those, and that would have been the difference in the game. But that's reassuring that Winston came in, kind of got his footing, and started hitting some passes towards the end. For comparison, Carr went 13 for 18, 103 yards for one touchdown. So if we're looking for positives, that's a positive for sure. Winston seems like he's comfortable in the offense, and he should be. He started games last year. I think they said something like 86 games total as a starter, between Tampa and here. So, how did you feel about Winston back there outside of unfortunately not putting up a touchdown?
I mean, he looked good. Obviously, it'll get him a little bit more comfortable here, practicing more than likely first team reps in this upcoming week. I think I spoke on it earlier. Obviously, Winston came in. He's not unknown to this offense. He knows who
Right.
he's playing with, and his first pass was, I think, like a 5 or 6 yard completion to Jawan Johnson, somebody who we haven't seen a whole lot of this season. So maybe next week that'll open up some more targets with him, being that him and Winston had that connection in the previous seasons.
Right.
But I feel like he'll fit in comfortably. We'll have to watch it through practices and into next week. But you feel good. You can't go wrong with Winston as your backup quarterback coming in.
Right. Yeah, there's a reason that as soon as Aaron Rodgers went down for the Jets, he was at the top of the list for names that were popping up because there's for a backup, there's probably no one more serviceable in the league, and if you had to choose top three for backups right now in the league. So I know the Panthers are playing a backup who was a backup for us as well, and Andy Dalton this year, with Bryce Young down, and then Falcons lost, so that gave us something. So now us and the Falcons are both 2-1. So we're just kind of waiting on that Bucs game on Monday to see if the NFC South is very crowded at the top again. And it also seems like it was a rough game for the Falcons as well, which I think people expected the Falcons to play all season how they played today, dropping 20-6 to the Detroit Lions. So hopefully, for the sake of the Saints' record and the Saints' NFC South chances, the Panthers and the Falcons continue on trend to be what people expected. I'm still not quite sold on Baker Mayfield not being able to give us a run for their money as far as the NFC South picture. How are you feeling about that?
Baker Mayfield, because you've got to look at a small sample size thus far this season. And what I see is Mike Evans is making Baker Mayfield look really good right now. Now, whether that is a matter of really good chemistry between the quarterback and veteran wide receiver who knows the offense, knows the program, or if it's Mike Evans just proving what money he's worth, is still kind of to be seen. But like you said, we'll see a lot more. We'll know a lot more whenever they take on the 2-0 Eagles tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the Eagles are one of those teams in the NFL too where people are kind of looking at them like, are they as good as we thought they were going to be? But the Bucs are kind of the opposite. It's like, are they better than we thought they were going to be? So that's going to be a real fun game for Monday Night Football.
I really think that's the case with, if you look at it, the whole NFC right now, because aside from the 49ers, there hasn't really been any other team that I've seen has stood out that's a next level above any other. Because you had spoke on the Falcons and Lions game. The Lions were at home, and they showed out defensively after dropping a close one against Seattle last week. They held the Atlanta offense to 6 points, and that's incredible coming from what they are. Dan Campbell has definitely turned around this Lions team, and I think whenever later in the season when they come to the Dome, I believe that's going to be a marquee matchup in New Orleans.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And, I kind of think of I have like a soft spot in my heart for the Detroit Lions just because it feels like, there's a lot of I don't want to say second chance Saints over there, but it definitely feels like Detroit is following a mold. They got Dan Campbell, who was formerly, with the Saints. They have Aaron Glenn, who was formerly with the Saints. They have CD, who's hurt right now, but with the Saints, they have Anzalone. It just feels like when you look at that team, it looks like the big names on that team, came from the New Orleans Saints tree, which is sometimes a hard pill to swallow because you look at those guys having Anzalone's having the best games of his career so far with the Lions, and if he could have played like that for us, him and DeMario, and if we still draft Pete, there's no room, for error with those three guys the way they're all playing right now. But we'll kind of jump into bright spots here. Like a lot of the focus on this game, like we said, is going to be on the Derek Carr, injuries or injury. They took him to a local hospital, but for me, there's still a lot of bright spots. Before that, despite the sacks, it felt like Derek Carr was a little more on time. The drives felt a little more surgical. It felt like he was kind of getting into the groove of the offense. Obviously, depending on how long he's out for the injury, that might have to be, reassessed and kind of going further. But the only way you get that way is through game time. So that was nice to see. Happy to see some tight end involvement as well. That was one thing I talked about pregame. It just feels like those guys are your safety valves, especially for a line that's struggling. And the fact that Juwan Johnson and Jimmy Graham have kind of been, quiet in the first 2 games of the season, it was really awesome to see Jimmy get that touchdown, not only wearing a Saints jersey, but in, the next franchise that kind of embraced him in the Packers. And then Alontae Taylor, that's my 3 bright spots. Nothing has to be said about Alontae Taylor. Everything that he did on the field is exactly, what I think Dennis Allen alluded to he was going to be able to do, and he did it and then some.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Alontae was all over the field today, and going over, social media, there were a lot of people questioning whether or not Adebo would come back and, have a spot if somebody else is able to step into that slot position. And I mean, really, that's not a conversation to be had right now, because he was out with the hamstring injury. Adebo is a really outstanding player, but the way that Taylor was just all over the field today, it seemed like every other pass Jordan Love was throwing, it was being broken up by Alontae Taylor. Another bright spot, personally, in my mind, was Kendre Miller. Obviously, he didn't have a stupendous game, but you can't really fault the hard running that he had. I mean, averaging almost 4 yards a pop, he and Tony Jones both. It seemed like they had good splits, good distributions between them, and it was good hard-nosed running. It's good reps for him to get coming off of that hamstring injury that was nagging him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there was a couple times that Kendre cut into a hole, and he just looked really comfortable, on his legs and his in general and his cuts. Even with time, he'll start to understand even more so the offense. And the great thing about it is, in I would say 6 or 7 weeks, we don't need him to be a standout running back yet. We need him to be Kendre Miller. Between now and then, we might need him to be a little more of a playmaker. But once we get Jamal Williams back, it's going to be really nice to see. And I don't know how much the Saints are going to want to use Taysom Hill in the traditional role that we kind of saw him in last week, which is where he shines a little bit, doing everything. But I hope they don't stray from that, because even if you have to keep Winston off the field while Taysom is on the field, just for, you don't want to, some crazy instance of where, Winston gets taken out at the knees and Taysom gets a concussion, you obviously don't want that to happen in the same play. But I still don't think there's any reason that you can't put Winston in there, towards the end of that game, like we talked about briefly before we went live. I think that should have been Taysom time. Yeah, 1st and 10, I think, on like the 42. You wound up settling for the first one was the Taysom run up the middle for a yard. And then I think after that, you threw to Michael Thomas for like 2 yards, or maybe been incomplete before. I can't remember, but it just felt like you put Taysom in there, and even if it does nothing but get yards and waste the clock, you're still forcing Green Bay to use their timeouts. Because if we make that field goal there, it was still 1 minute and 5 seconds left on the clock. And the way Jordan Love was operating, there's no question in my mind that he probably could have got down and at least given them a shot for a long field goal, So I hope that is not something the Saints are afraid to do, is still just put the ball in Taysom's hands and let Taysom be Taysom.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you speak on having Taysom in that role in which he excels in, that it's really hard to not hand him the ball in those situations whenever you need him. Obviously, with the Carr injury, it now becomes more of a concern letting him run in between the tackles, because he was listed early on this week in the injury report with a knee issue, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I think it was a knee.
But because those are the positions that you need them in. That's what you need to have your best players playing their best football in, and they have to have those opportunities to be able to do that. Now, obviously, with the Carr injury, that leaves you at Taysom being your backup quarterback behind Winston, and so you get Kamara back from suspension. you still stuck with Jake Hayner on a 3-week suspension, and now that's
Right.
kind of looming large here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's just unfortunate timing that you have so many guys. The secondary stepped up with, May out, and then Alontae Taylor, or May suspended, and Alontae Taylor stepped up in the corner role when he slid over to Debo's spot. And, I think a good safety is one that you don't hear the name of. And so the fact that we had, Jordan Howden back there for a lot of the game, and I didn't hear his name, that's probably a good thing for a safety. If he's getting beat over the top, you would hear that the safety didn't, move over in time. The safety didn't do this in time. But the only safety play I remember is the bomb down the middle where Demario Davis was chasing, I think it was Dobbs, and both Tyrann Mathieu and the rookie Howden were there. That's what you want to see out of your safeties. So that was another bright spot if the secondary stepping up in multiple instances where, and even Yadam, I know people are probably going to look at the fact that he gave up that touchdown at the end there, but for a wide receiver, for corners, it's unfortunate because you only have to win once as a wide receiver to look like you had the better game against the cornerback there, But I think he held his own once they moved Dobbs over there to him and stopped running him on Marshawn's side. It didn't feel like he gave up any crazy plays outside of the touchdown, but that was just a 7-yard thing that they ran back to back, literally the same play, and he still was there. He just the receiver played it better. There's nothing else to it.
Yeah, and I mean before we move on, you just got to look early on at Alontae Taylor's box score. I'd have him in position even with the loss for a defensive player of the week honor because dude had 5 tackles. Alontae Taylor had 2 tackles for loss, including a sack, and 5 pass breakups. That is insane for him stepping into that position. And then you spoke on Yidam also. He had 4 pass deflections of his own. But like you said, the wide receiver won one time, and that ends up being the difference ultimately in the game. And it's brutal for those defensive backs.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, I don't think Dobbs really. I don't even know the stat line, to be honest with you. I guess I could look it up, but I don't think he had some phenomenal game. And so let's see here: 5 receptions, 73 yards, 1 touchdown. So yeah, I mean, a serviceable game for sure. But considering he's going up against pretty much a rookie in game time, as far as that goes, no matter which way you spin it. It's impressive, and like I said, it's unfortunate that people are going to remember that touchdown that he gave up when in reality he really had a solid overall game. So that brings us to the next thing I was going to bring up is your player of the game. It sounds like it's going to be Alontae Taylor.
Oh, play the game.
Player of the game. Player of the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to go against anybody but Alontae.
Right.
I mean, obviously you could pin it on anybody in the defense. Alontae, I will go on record saying is my player of the game, but the defense really just as a whole, I did not expect them to have this well of a performance, even giving up the 18 points in the second half. It was because I think the offense punted like 5 or 6 times on their possession here in the second half, and it's just rough getting with the defense, having to come and defend those short fields, having to defend with minimal breaks at best. But for them to keep coming out on the field and really holding Green Bay to 3 points until 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter is outstanding.
Yeah, and the time of possession won't really show it. It's only a 5-minute difference between the Saints and the Packers as far as that goes. But it felt like the fourth quarter time of possession was like 2 minutes to 13 minutes. It just saw a whole lot of Green Bay and Jordan Love, and it's never going to bode well for a defense when you're playing that much and that long. So, like you said, props to the defense. They held their own. One more field goal, and the game is the Saints to win. So But yeah, I definitely go with Alontae Taylor for player of the game as well. I mean, he had that pass interference, but other than that, it's just I can't think of it. Any other play where it was like, wow, he's looking bad out there. He looked amazing, and kind of quietly just having a really good like statistical season, like already 2 pass breakups. He looks like he's been just a half a second short on probably. Um, 2 or 3 interceptions. And then, he's already before this, he was sitting at 2 tackles for loss. I think he had another 1 or 2 today, and then he had the sack today and then 2 pass deflections today. So he's very quietly having a phenomenal season. It's just he's playing out there with Marshawn Lattimore, who, in my opinion, is the best corner of the league. So he's going to get tested. So his stats are going to look better. But at the same time, he's got to step up, and he has. So it's been a lot of fun to watch that progression in him. But we'll kind of jump into the remaining slate. We have Panthers against Seattle at Seattle. Right now, it's 6-3. Seattle's winning, and they have the ball. If the Panthers fall to 0-3, that helps us long term in the season to just kind of keep on, kind of like last year. Whereas if we can stay afloat towards the end of the year, it looks like the NFC South's going to come down to 1 or 2 games at the end of the season again, just like it did today. But we got Bears, Chiefs, Packers, or Panthers, Seahawks, Cowboys, Cardinals. And then looks like we have the Steelers and Raiders for Sunday Night Football. It's going to be a pretty packed slate. I mean, there are a lot of question marks. Or the Cowboys as good as they go up, right? Have they hit their ceiling? Currently losing to the Cardinals 9-0, and then the Chiefs. Is Travis Kelce going to go off because Taylor Swift's in the building? What do you think on that?
I mean, I believe I called it very early on in the day. I think Kelce has a performance. He's going to go and show Taylor Swift how he rocks the stage in Arrowhead.
I like that.
But I mean, obviously, speaking on the Cowboys for a minute, obviously the injury losing Trayvon Diggs for the season with the ACL tear, it's rough. That's a big hit on the defense. We just got to see how good, how deep is this Cowboys defense really? Can they live up to the expectations that they've shown they're capable of in the first 2 weeks of the season? I think eventually we'll see kind of a plateau with the offense. I think the defensive efforts in the first couple of weeks have really gave them some strong momentum, and then especially with the opponents, obviously a 40-0 shutout against the New York Giants. You don't see that a lot in the NFL these days. It's hard to keep teams off of the board for a whole 60 minutes. You're playing against other professional football players, and I think if the Cowboys are really going to do something special this season, the defense is going to be why. Especially being headed by Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I know they made a comment about Shaheed today that made me think of the comment that they made about Micah Parsons. But people are watching Micah Parsons in practice, and they're saying that they need to take him off the field for practice just to give the offense some run. And then same thing with Shaheed. They said his first season in training camp, they winded up not playing him some in the training camp just because they knew he had speed. That was not a question, but it was just like he was running too hard. And it feels like Michael Parsons is the same way. Like he wants to practice how he plays, and he's not going to let whatever it is, training camp practice or any of the above really dictate how he's going to go after it. So another thing was the Bills. I said this is going to be a game where it's either the Bills show that they're not over, they're not washed, or the Commanders show everybody that they're the real deal. Unfortunately, Sam Howell threw for 4 interceptions. Bills won 37-3, pretty dominant win, 21 points in the fourth quarter. But then, man, 70 points put up by the
That is a
Miami Dolphins.
college score.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, you see, they gave up 20 points, right? And the defense in Miami is really good. It's, Dave said on the pregame show that it's really fast. The whole team is fast, but 70 points. It's kind of like we were just talking about with, like, the Saints defense. When you're on the field that much in the fourth quarter, it's bound to happen. You're bound to let the other team score. But when you score 70 points, that's almost, to me, more impressive that you only gave up 20 points. Like, because if you score, what do? You give the other team the ball, right? Like, and if you're scoring in that quick succession, not a single field goal, not a single, and all touchdowns. I mean, that's insane to me. Like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you speaking on the Miami defense. Denver even had a 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So you take that away, it's even more of an impressive showing overall. Miami, they had questions about how long. I believe Terry Bradshaw on the pregame show this morning was asking if Miami could actually sustain this all season. Who's going to be able to stop Miami from putting up 50-plus week in and week out? This offense is next level right now.
Yeah, we talked about Mike McDaniels before the game. And he's not quite the Mike Tomlin of coaches. He's very casual, very funny, and man, I tell you, he's got that team going in the right direction. And I think the other big win for Miami in that game is the fact that Tua was sacked a total of 0 times. That just feels very different from what we were used to seeing Tua get, unfortunately. So Tua is showing that when he has time and he's given the opportunity, he can win football, and he can win it in very, very impressive fashion. So it's exciting to see an AFC team be that good. I don't want them in the NFC. They can stay over there. We got enough competition, but really exciting to see that for Tua and the Dolphins for sure. So, but other than that, I think that about wraps it up. You got anything else to say about the Saints before we close it out?
No, man. I mean, we're 2-1. We take the record as it is. Obviously, we'll move forward with Winston at quarterback, and we get Alvin Kamara back next week, and we'll see how both of those players are able to work into the offense, and we will return home to the Dome, and we'll go from there. Hopefully, move into 3-1.
Yep, we could definitely, depending on what Tampa does tomorrow and what we do, the game against Tampa next week, we could make a nice little barrier for ourselves in the NFC South, depending on how the next 2 games for Tampa go tomorrow and then against us. But we've always kind of had Tampa's number, even when they were before the Tom Brady days and even during the Tom Brady days. So hopefully Baker Mayfield doesn't change that.
Yeah, I completely.
All right, bud. Well, thanks for stopping by again. This was the post-game show on the Kneaux. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and we'll be doing this all season.